There we go.
Hey Scott, hi everybody. Glad to be back this week. I have heard from some of you in our last webinar. I announced I wanted to do a webinar based on relationship and recovery advice you've gotten, whether you think it's good, bad, or you're wondering. So I've heard back from a few people. We're going to keep collecting those responses till we have enough, and then we'll announce a date that we're going to do the advice that you've gotten in recovery for your relationship webinar. So if you would like to contribute a piece of advice, and we're going to be looking at this through the lens of is it helpful or hurtful for relationships? This piece of advice will look through the lens of secure functioning, um, what induces people to grow in their relationships rather than wither in their relationships. So if you want to submit a question, you can either email myself directly or Scott, and we'll collect those, and hopefully we get to do one of those webinars soon. The topic today is This Hurts, Why Can't I Quit You? And I want to talk about the concept of relationship addiction. But of course, there's going to be a turn in this. So I recently heard from somebody I was working with speaking about their relationship. They said, when are we going to get to a point where we can have an awful knockdown, drag out fight, say terrible things to each other and about each other, and then say, I'm sorry, and move on? And I said, once, probably. If that's your mode of fighting, it's probably never going to happen that you can say, I'm sorry, and then really move on, because there's bells that you can't unring. And it got me thinking about um, really harmful relationship dynamics that I think almost anybody would look at without any context for the relationship. And if you saw a couple doing some of these things, you'd think, wow, that is not a good relationship. That's not working very well. Um, but I think the vast majority of people that I work with, couples that I work with, have at least some aspect of this to their relationship. Some aspect of a hurtful dynamic that they do over and over again. It doesn't stop. Does extreme damage every time. And so it got me thinking about quote unquote toxic relationships would be the pop psychology term for it. Can relationships be addictive? That's what we'll look at today. The short answer is yeah, relationships can be addictive, but I think it's less about the person you're with, and I think it's more about the dynamic that you've created. Um, when there are high highs, like unbelievably high highs and unbelievably low lows in a relationship, that's a recipe for something that's really sticky and something that's hard to change. Um, this is not, we're not going to talk about codependency. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a co-created dynamic, two people contributing that doesn't not only isn't good for either one of them, it's hard for both of them to get out of. Um, I want to focus on why some relationship dynamics are so sticky, alluring, and hard to stop, be that leaving or just changing how we interact with each other. So first, we got to back up and we got to understand the mechanisms of addiction, and this is not technical at all. This is more like a high level think in these terms. So people are susceptible to addictive processes and even substances to some degree when they're under chronic stress, threat, or unsafety, and something that gives quick and quote unquote easy relief comes along. Addictive practices, substances, and dynamics are famous for being low to no real harm on the front end. And then you have quickly compounding consequences on the back end. So something that on the front end is um, maybe it's not going to hurt me to use cocaine once, maybe no big life alterations. But if I use it chronically, if I continue to use it, I may even function for a while and there's not any holes in the armor. But when the consequences come, they come hard and fast. And it's the same with these relationship dynamics. When we're nasty to each other in a fight, when we're uncaring, non-protective, fill in the blank with those things you don't like to experience in a relationship, it can still appear functional for a while. And then when it stops functioning, it stops hard, and the consequences are deep and the distress is deep. So again, that idea is we're susceptible to processes we can't quit when stress levels are high and chronic, and something that offers quick, comparatively easy relief comes along. So just take, for example, there, like screaming at your partner as a means of communication. Usually not something we do unless we're under high stress. And how does an individual usually respond when you scream at them? They usually stop what they're doing right away, even if they scream back. The initial stimulus, the thing that was bothering you, stops right away. So there you have a really commonplace thing. Those of you that are parents, you know how this works with kids. You have this really commonplace thing that I don't know that anybody really feels proud about. Will justify it. No one really feels proud of it and says, that's really me using my best tools there. But it's so easy to have it happen, and it's so easy to get stuck in that. There's two main modes in regards to what we're talking about. There's two main modes you can do your relationship in. You can do the feel better now way of having a relationship. Some ways that looks like taking turns being what's ultimately self-serving. So we take turns doing it your way or my way. And we may decide on the turn either through who wins the argument, who's most stubborn, or I've even had some couples say overtly to each other, well, you won the last one, so I get this one. And I have never, ever seen that work like a turn in Monopoly where someone's like, oh, yeah, well, it's your turn. The fun game continues, which I don't think Monopoly is fun, by the way. So I'd have to pick a different game. But yeah, I've never seen that kind of overt turn taking, even when there's an actual tally. I've never seen anybody say like, oh yeah, and I can't wait till it's my turn again. I'm so glad you get to have a turn. Like, it bakes unfairness into the recipe. It bakes it bakes feelings of having been dealt with unjustly into the recipe. And anytime those kind of feelings or those kind of dynamics are allowed to ride even once, you can bet they'll come back up again on the other end. So that which I say and do to you in order to win this argument, stop this, get what I want, we can almost guarantee that you'll say and do it to me at some later point, and you'll feel justified in it because I did it. And then the fight continues and gets even more complicated. Whenever I see another way to do the feel better now relationship is using coercion, manipulation, and emotional threat to get what we want now. So a really common example of this that I see in couples is either the presence of anger or tears. Now, don't get me wrong, both are very valid. Those are valid human emotions. They ought to be dealt with. Those are also usually emotions that are, again, they're a conversation ender. Most folks are not comfortable enough with anger or tears to let those play out and then get back to the task of figuring out what's going to be best for us. And I'll see with the majority of couples that I work with, at least initially, there is one or both of those emotions that become ways to coerce or to change the course of a conversation or a negotiation that's not going the way someone wants it to go. So again, it's really effective at maybe stopping a troublesome dynamic or a troublesome feeling quick, but I've never seen anybody give in to tears or anger and then later say, I'm so glad you turned on the waterworks. I'm so glad you got pissed off at me. I never would have seen the light. Again, it bakes in this unfairness that's going to come up later. This is one that I see really, really commonly, and I even think it gets over supported by individual therapists. So the idea of taking a break, I have to be by myself in order to figure this out. Now, I'm not saying that taking a time out to regulate is not a good idea. It is. It can be. But when the tension gets high, or the stakes are high for what we're trying to negotiate, saying, I got to stop, I got to take a break. It's like the way that I still largely mountain bike. I don't, this summer I've gotten faster because I've really tried to push the discomfort. When I feel discomfort in my legs, my muscles are tired, when my lungs are tired and burning, I really try to push in that zone for a little longer than I normally would. I'm famous for, as soon as it gets uncomfortable, even like when I start to sweat profusely, it's like, oh, time to pull back. And then I'm sitting here wondering, like, why am I such a slow rider? It's the same thing in a relationship. If we're always pulling the ripcord and going to our separate corners, the minute it gets hard or uncomfortable, or we even get frustrated, we don't ever develop skills or muscles to co-regulate, co-solve problems, stay at the helm together, and figure things out. And then what we come back with after going to our own corner is we run a huge risk of coming back more self-centered than we were before. I lost track of you while I was taking care of myself. So I'm coming back with my own ideas, what I want. And I actually see long term, if that's the only stress relief mechanism that couples use, I actually see long term, they stay self-centered, they stay selfish, they don't think in two-person ways, and that feeds it. So it feels better right now. We're not having these awkward silences, or I'm not having to look at your disappointed face, or not having to feel the fear that I have that, gosh, if we don't figure this out, it may not work out. Feels better now. In the long run, I don't think it sets us up for much better success. Again, and that's if that's the sole way that you handle conflict in the relationship. That's fine to have it in your toolbox. And on occasion, call a personal timeout so that you can come back regulated. But that is not the best or the only way to regulate your emotions when you're in conflict with your partner. On the other hand, allowing no distance. Don't ever leave me in any way, shape, or form, or when there's threats. You may get your partner to stay close and not trigger feelings of abandonment and fear in you, but you'll likely have a partner who feels like a dog that's tied up in the yard. It's just a matter of time before they get out and they bolt, or they tear up the yard, or you let them in the house and they don't know how to behave. On and on with the dog metaphor. Um, but differentiation is essential in a healthy relationship. And that means we do have to allow each other to disagree. We do have to allow each other to take the time that's needed to actually weigh options, and not just go with our first impulse, but maybe come to the table educated by each other's perspectives. Um, and that is something that takes some individual time and focus. So that dynamic of like only relying on distance or never allowing distance can alleviate some stresses short term, but it creates a relationship that is on a hair trigger. Again, there's no muscle, there's no long-term muscle behind what we're trying to lift, figure out, do. So those are some examples, and we could come up with hundreds of examples of the feel better right now way of doing relationships. Or there's the do better form of doing a relationship. And talking about these two ways of doing a relationship is all in service of breaking unhealthy cycles. What we just described is that's where unhealthy, or you could say like addictive relationship cycles come from. High stress, something that alleviates that stress right now. Doesn't matter if it lasts long. I just want the edge off right now. You could fill that hole with sex, drugs, video games, shopping. Like that's the recipe where addiction forms. That's the recipe where a relationship to a behavior, no matter how harmful it is in the long run, we have a hard time breaking up with it. And that's what happens in relationships all the time. So the do better form, and pay attention to the verbiage here. I'm sure you'll catch on with 2 or 3 examples of this. We take seriously the impact of harm, and we don't rely on forgiveness alone to keep things clean between the two of us. So it's the hardest thing in the world to bite your tongue when you're angry, or you're used to lashing out, or that's just the way that you fight. It's the hardest thing in the world to stop yourself and not say, well, I was gonna say, and then say it anyway. But no, like, that's my anger, that's my rage, that's just for me. It's hard to stop that. But again, remember, even the things you say when you're really, really mad, and maybe your partner can even see clearly, like, my partner here is in an altered state. This is not how they normally are. This is not how they normally feel. You cannot unring the bell. It won't matter to your partner whether you were high on laughing gas or had just had a root canal and you said something awful to them. So we take it seriously that what we say matters, that we can cause harm, that we can cause scars, that the bell cannot be unrung. And so if it is your tendency to be unfair or nasty when you fight, you work on that. At a basic level, we can disagree vehemently, but we're going to be civil with each other. We're not going to attack character. We can attack problems, we can attack ideas, but never each other. And that never means like never, because you only get like one or two, I just said the most awful thing ever, that can be covered by forgiveness. And then it's all about you stop doing that, or we're just doing damage to each other. We do what is right with regards to our relationship, even when it's the hardest thing, or we don't want to. Stan Tatkin often talks about doing the right thing when the right thing is the hardest thing, and often the right thing is the hardest thing. So it's quality versus speed often when it comes to relationships, when it comes to how we're going to live our lives. So when we're committed to, we will look out for what's best, not just the first idea that comes to us. We'll really evaluate our options and we'll decide what to do versus this is the first idea I had and that feels like it's going to bring relief quick. So it's the best idea. Like we really put our ideas through the ringer. We really put our actions through the ringer. The third one, and again, we could do hundreds of these. I just put down a handful here. We think about the reverberations of present actions or attitudes, meaning we look into the future. So if I'm using threats or coercion right now to get what I want, when I look into the future, what do I see? Well, I see you loaded with threat and coercion because I just got away with it. And you can bet you're going to do the same thing to me. Or if you don't, you're going to build resentment against me. And I'm going to walk around feeling like I can get away with murder because I just did in a relationship. So we think things through. I know this sounds way oversimplistic, especially to couples who are largely not regulated well together. But one thing I notice about the couples I work with who have been able to co-regulate really well, they rely on thinking things through together. They can talk through, oh, I like that idea. What do you think would happen under these circumstances if that's what we did? And they don't take that as an attack or anybody being difficult. It's this like, yeah, it feels good to think through and know we have a good plan. So you'll notice already each of those sentences starts with we, hint, hint. The better way of doing a relationship, the do better, is the fundamental law of the universe on that is we move from one person thinking to two-person thinking. We're always going to think in terms of us. Even if I don't like you right now, even if I don't know if I want to be with you down the road, we're still going to think in terms of us, what's best for us right now, where we're at. That can include, like, for example, lest you get the idea that thinking about us is always like holding hands, skipping through the daisies, having nothing but love for each other. Sometimes what is best for us is we're going to separate. Sometimes what is best for us is we're going to sign a postnup. We're going to have a financial agreement so you don't have to worry about me screwing you over should we get a divorce. So what's best for us is not, again, it's that idea. It's not always happiness, roses, daisies. It's what is the very best thing that we could do for our relationship right now? There was a couple I worked with a long time ago, and she was the addict, he was the betrayed partner, and he would threaten divorce all the time. And of course, she was getting really sick of it, and the more he threatened and less he followed through, the more like a caged animal he became. During a marital session one day, I turned to him and I said, "I want you to go talk to a divorce attorney," right in front of her. And they were both like, "What?" Like, I thought we've said we want to stay married. And I said, "Yeah, I'm sick of the threat. It comes across all the time. You don't ever do it. You're harmed by it. Like, go talk to a divorce attorney and find out what it'd be like." And they're like, "Together?" And I said, "No, just him." And he came back and he had done it. And he said, I talked to a divorce attorney. We looked at the financials. With a very down the middle fair split of our assets, we would both be fine. Guess who never threatened divorce again? Again, thinking in terms of what's best for the two of us is sometimes looking over that cliff and saying, what would it actually look like if we went over this? And then we find out, oh, it's not a cliff. It's maybe a 5-foot drop. It'll hurt, but it's not going to end our life. So we don't have to use this big looming threat or this big looming fear. We don't have to live under the fear. We can live under, we're making decisions to be here. And that's what that turned into, is when he looked at divorce and realized I would be okay, you would be okay. It allowed him to decide to put a stake in the relationship and really stay, really work on things. It was pivotal. We don't move forward on anything unless we agree it's best for both of us. So, of course, there's personal decisions that you make. And I don't think that when you're in a relationship, every decision should be a coupleship decision. Here's some examples in recovery. Who your individual sponsorship is, or your individual sponsor is. I don't think that should be a decision made by the relationship committee. If there are problems as a result of who sponsors you, you should discuss. There should be some basics, and a lot of these basics are already covered in the bylaws of different meetings, like we don't sponsor cross genders, no 13th stepping, like no sexual or romantic relationships between sponsors and sponsees, or other people in the group. So there are definitely some decisions that need to be a personal decision, and if and when it causes harm to the relationship, then we talk together. But I'm talking like decisions that are relationship territory, like where should we live? What should we do with our joint money, if that's how you're handling your money? Who should we see for marriage therapy? What kind of help and support should we get? What kind of time should we give each other to get that? If you don't agree on the best course of action, you can't have a change. Nobody can go and strike out on their own. Even if you strike out on your own and you come back with something wonderful, again, think of what that bakes into the relationship. I just did whatever the heck I wanted, and the result was fantastic. So I'm using that to justify I didn't get my partner on board, or we didn't work on this together. Well, the next time my partner has an opportunity to go for something they really, really want and I disagree, guess what my partner's going to think of? Well, remember that time when so turnabout is fair play. So you make decisions together or you don't get a change. We use time to allow flexibility and creativity. So this isn't the same as we go to our corners and brood. It's we slow down our whole process, because often my need versus your need, they're actually not diametrically opposed. And if we have just an ounce of creativity or an ounce of flexibility, often we can find solutions where everybody gets something that they want, or a lot of what they want, or all of what they want. But those kind of solutions generally take more brain power, more patience, more time, more coming back to the problem again and again to see it from a different angle. And so couples that I work with who are functioning securely, they get that intuitively. They don't rush decisions. A lot of times they'll say, yeah, I like the options that we have right now, not in love with any of them. Like, can we come back to this? Let's think about it for a few days and let's come back to it. And they make better choices, they make better decisions. And then that process of like, what's good for both of us, it becomes faster. they practice it. We're effective at co-regulating. I did a one of the topics, I don't know how many times ago, but it was recent, is we get nothing, we realize we get nothing if there's not co-constructed safety. So we're effective at co-regulating, we're effective at keeping a strong foundation of co-constructed safety. And we're accountable to the higher ideals of the relationship. Now, this is a little bit of a twist from what a lot of folks hear. Again, some relationship advice at the beginning of recovery. You've got to be accountable to your spouse. Not a bad idea, but all too often it turns into this parent-child, cop-robber dynamic. Accountability is really, really important. I think what we're accountable to matters a lot. So if you and I in a relationship, we say fairness is the most important thing we could do together, we will not let anything fly in this relationship that does not pass the smell test for fairness with both of us. Guess what I'm accountable to in my actions when I'm unfair? It's not you. It's this promise that we made. I made it. I signed on the dotted line. I said fairness is more important than anything. So that does a couple things. The spouse who's been hurt, you don't have to become this angry parent or this punishing entity. You can just say, hey, fairness, buddy. Like we agreed. What are you doing? And for the person who has betrayed and gone against that value, you do need to make it right with your partner, but you don't have to grovel and you don't have to become like their footstool. When it's the higher ideal that we're accountable to, when I mess up, I can say, you're right. I messed up. There's no excuse. Here's what I'm going to correct. And it's not this lengthy, drawn out, who's going to be in charge, who's going to have the power, because we have given the power, we've escrowed the power in higher relational principles, ideas that are bigger than both of us. Which I don't know about you, I'm way more prone to have an easier time giving myself over to an ideal, giving myself over to a principle than I am to a person. So to wrap it up, maybe a skill you can take away in individual recovery, we talk about 3 circles plans: red lights, yellow lights, green lights. If you're watching this and you are intrigued by this idea, we've got these sticky dynamics that we can't stop. They're alluring, they get us relief fast, but they're not great for us in the future. I would think about a 3 circles plan for your coupleship. What are the types of interactions? What are the types of things we could do or say to each other that make us both want to quit on the spot? There's your red circle. What are the signs and symptoms that we're in trouble? We're not headed to a good place. There's your yellow circle, your middle circle. And then this list, and again, we could put hundreds on here, these we statements are governing principles. There's your green circle. And so when you both mess up, when you allow one of those relapse dynamics, one of those it's quick relief but bad for our future dynamics, you do what you would do in an individual setting when you're working on stopping an addictive behavior. You get accountable, get some support, you would talk it through, you'd make a plan for how you're going to address the hole in the lifeboat. Coupleships don't get better just because individuals are getting better. Coupleships are their own animal, they're their own thing. And so you really have to be on top of it together. You have to be accountable together. You have to know what you are about and what you can't be about together. So I hope this is helpful, looking at some of those relationship dynamics that are sticky, hard to stop, ultimately harmful. And I hope it's also validating why it's so easy to do that. Awful people don't do that. Really brilliant people, really, really on top of it. Otherwise, functional people do that all the time because, again, under immense stress, we're looking for quick relief. And that's the recipe for a behavior that's hard to break up with.
Thank you, Jon. We're right in the middle here. So will you tell everybody, for all the late arrivals, about the upcoming webinar that we'd like to do? And I'll pop info in the chat feature for them.
Yeah, so I want to do a webinar where we take advice that you have gotten or you've heard about how to handle your relationship in recovery. whether you think it's good, bad, or I don't know what kind of advice this is. I'm curious about it. And we're going to discuss it through the lens of secure functioning and through the lens of coupleship principles. We're going to pick apart common relationship advice for recovering couples. So you can send that advice. I'd like to get it ahead of time so that I know we have a webinar that can be that topic for the whole time. So you're going to send that ahead of time to Scott or myself. Scott's got his email in the chat. I'll put mine in the chat in a minute here. And we'll announce a couple webinars ahead of time when we're planning on doing that one, when we get enough responses.
Cool. Thank you. Couple of quick questions for you. Excuse me. You mentioned one-person systems versus two-person systems, and the unhealthy stuff was all one person, and the healthy stuff was two-person. And you've talked about this before, but can you just give a brief summary of the difference between a one-person and a two-person system?
Yeah, so a one person system is where I am thinking about myself only or primarily, and I'm prioritizing my own needs, wants, and feelings. A two-person system is where two people simultaneously are thinking about themselves and the other almost equally. I always say it's got to be 51-49 because your partner will never represent you as well as you can. But that's pretty darn close. So a two-person system is where I'm thinking about the impact on me and you at the same time. I'm thinking about what I want and what you want at the same time. I'm watching my own back and your back at the same time. It's exponentially more complex in every way, neurologically, mentally, emotionally, to do a two-person system. So when we're taxed, stressed, not practiced at it, it's very hard. It's like riding a unicycle and juggling. I think almost anyone could learn it, but for some people, it takes some time to coordinate all that movement.
Um, the best and easiest example of one-person and two-person systems that I find are on the Home and Garden channel. When couples are shopping for a home, and the one-person system couples, I have this much money. These are my kids. I need to consider my kids and my house. And it's her kitchen, but it's my house. I mean, it's usually the men who do this. And the two persons, and I always watch and think, God, that relationship is not going to last. And the two-person people, they're always like, well, she wants this, but I want this, and we think maybe, and there's a lot of we and not very much
Yeah.
I. It's a whole different experience, and you can see the realtors when it's a one-person system, like, okay, who do I have to cater to?
Yeah.
Who's going to win the argument? Whereas the two-person system, it's a very different dynamic on those shows, and I always find it. I'm like, wow. So.
That's such a good example.
And I like HGTV, so it's an obvious one for me. But yeah, it's like, oh my God, that couple is like, ooh, I don't want to be in that relationship, Um, so yeah, and you mentioned quality versus speed. I mean, one of the things that you talk about when you talk about communication skills is slow it down. Slow it down. Let's slow it down. We're not leaving the conversation. We're not even maybe taking a break or not. We're slowing it down so we can hear each other. And that's kind of a key to a two-person system, is being able to actually hear each other, right?
Yeah, it's firmly affixing the two data points, knowing that we really, really understand what the separate stakes, wants, desires, differences are before moving forward. Because a lot of the time I'll see couples who, they'll identify, well, we have a conflict and now we got to get out of it.
Yeah.
And all the solutions that they present, like, they both don't like them, and that's why there's not movement, because not because they're having bad ideas about what to do, is because the ideas that they're having about what to do are not really including all aspects of the needs or
Right.
problems or wants.
Yeah, and the one-person system will end up fighting each other. In a
Yeah.
two-person system, we can back up, slow down, and fight the problem.
So
And,
it's interesting. One of my favorite like ambush type questions to ask a couple in a first session is who's in charge here? And you'll see, very rarely do you get the unicorn where they'll say, well, both of us, of course. And there's no like, this is what we're supposed to say, or we're nervous to say this. How's this going to go over? Or the other day I asked that and I got this number from both. Or you'll see this like, we are both supposed to be in charge, right? Um, yeah, that secure functioning like two-person relationship is when we say we are both in charge, we have like this feeling and this history to back it up. No, that's
yeah,
how we operate the vast
yeah.
majority of the time.
Our relationship is in charge.
Yeah, like my last point here, the principles we've agreed to adhere to, that's actually what's in charge. It's not how I feel, or even what I want, unless what I want serves one of those higher ideals, then it's a green light.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to throw this out and because I think kind of a lot of what we're talking about here today and usually is intimacy. How do we have healthy, meaningful, enjoyable intimacy? Um, and here's the deal: intimacy is not always fun. Sometimes intimacy is difficult. Sometimes intimacy is really uncomfortable. And can you address that a little bit? Because everybody thinks intimacy, oh, my wife, we have such good intimacy. Everything's perfect all the time. That's not what intimacy means.
I think about it like it's been a couple years since I've grown tomatoes in the summer. I actually like having a garden, but here's why I don't do it because I often don't do it, or when I do it, it's not very high quality because it is so much work to keep it watered, weeded, pruned. Like if I want big, healthy produce throughout the season, like you can't just plant seeds and walk away. And I think intimacy is a lot the same way. There are phases of it. I think when you've cultivated something really well, you've weathered the awkward. I'm not quite sure what to do here. Don't know how to find you, or I tried to come in close and I poked you in the eye instead of giving you a big kiss. Like until you've navigated all of that kind of stuff and started working out the kinks that come up, it's not this inherently enjoyable thing. It's trying to get two hearts to beat as close to one as possible, not in idea but in purpose. And so it's like most things that are ultimately really rewarding. It's raising kids too. Um, there are really sweet, rewarding moments with a whole lot of work um, around it, or like building the trust that you really capitalize on. Like building trust is not my favorite thing to do. It's not enjoyable. It's not really comfortable. But enjoying the fruits of trust is wonderful. So it's like they say in 12-step fellowships, you got to earn it to own it. If you want a deeply rewarding, intimate relationship, you have to work at it. Even the like getting close thing. Um, I mean, and that can be as simple as like deciding what we like to do together, or deciding the right kind of environment where intimacy is easy and safe for us. There's a whole lot of behind the scenes there.
Thank you. Let's jump into the Q&A. We got a couple questions here. Type some more in and we'll get to as many as we can. How do you reply or live with someone who keeps acting out? How do you get the addict to open up? He's been an addict for over 10 years, and it feels like I'm a glutton for punishment. Um,
Yeah,
so how do you, yeah,
some different parts of that. I'll start with how do you get the addicts to open up? Um, I don't know that you can when someone's in active addiction because their primary relationship is not human.
right.
It's the substance, the behavior, the whatever. So unfortunately, when push comes to shove, if you've got a really stubborn behavioral stain, let's say, um, pain's really the best thing to get that out. The good news is in these types of situations, you don't have to cook up a punishment. You can let natural consequences flow, which is hard to do because your addicted partner, as numbed out as they might be, they will feel when you withdraw, when you say, listen, this isn't safe for me, or I can't keep going in this way, or we're not going to share a bank account because you drain it and we need to buy food. They're going to feel the withdrawal, and it's going to suck for you to watch them in that kind of pain. But um, when push comes to shove and things aren't changing, pain is a good motivator. Pain's almost the only good motivator. So the first part of that question, how do you live or reply to someone who keeps acting out, with boundaries and carefully? And I think this is this is a Scott and Tammy hybrid. I love how you guys talk about boundaries, that this isn't the wall that I build. It's like marking the path and saying, if you want a good relationship with me, come this way, not that way. So you live with boundaries, you take them seriously yourself. And when you said, am I a glutton for punishment? Um, I don't think it's that. I think it's for most of us, what hurts worse than living under these circumstances is losing somebody that we love,
Right.
be that temporarily or permanently. So most people I see in those kind of situations that are having a hard time, that the thing that they're having difficulty facing is their own loss, their own abandonment, their own grief. Because those what's the word I'm looking for? Those objectively suck. Like it's not a matter of I'm weak or anything like that. It's my alternative. Even if this starts to get healthy, it won't start to get healthy until one or both of us starts to face the loss potential here.
Let's jump to the next one here. What does recovery look like? What are the signs and symptoms of recovering? Is there withdrawal? What are the moods, etc.?
So there's a lot of other people who will say this more eloquently than I have. Here's the top ideas that are coming to mind. First of all, recovery looks like recognizing that you cannot solve this problem with your own ideas. So it looks like getting connected. It looks like reading recovery material. It looks like getting serious about which behaviors are problematic and learning ways to stop them. It looks like therapy. It looks like 12-step support. It looks like work groups like the ones that Scott uh, does. And ultimately, it's a lifestyle remodel. Everything's on the table. Um, the old saying is, that which we put in front of our recovery, we lose. And I've seen people bargain all the time, like even with like internet access on a phone. I've seen guys for years go back and forth on whether or not they should have filters on their phones or things like that. Recovery looks like dedicating whatever it takes. If I cannot trust myself with the internet in my pocket, internet is no longer in my pocket, no matter how inconvenient that is. Because being sober is the most important thing. Um, Symptoms of recovery, I think at first it's moodiness. I think
Yeah.
at first it's a lot of agitation because you're taking away the crutch, you're taking away the numbing agent. And it's not like a smooth, I have all these skills that I can just use, nor can you develop those skills when you can't feel the feelings. You can't regulate a feeling that you can't feel. So there's this gap in early recovery where you're it's not an excuse for the person doing this, but you're kind of a bear to live with because you're a raw nerve and you haven't learned how to take care of yourself yet. And then little by little, on the outside, I'd say the first 18 months of solid recovery doesn't really look like anything to someone on the outside. To the person on the inside, they're saying, wow, I'm really becoming a different person. And so it also looks like this mismatch where a partner may be saying, what are you even working on? Nothing's changing. And the person in recovery is saying, everything is changing. Why can't you see it? And that's not a matter, often it's not a matter of lack of effort or even like um, lack of interest from the partner on the outside. It's just takes a while for beliefs to shift and start to manifest in new ways of being. And then long term, it looks like we're both grateful you're in this. It looks like a new way of living. It looks like a connection to people instead of substances and behaviors to take care of myself. And it looks like giving back, um, helping others along the way. And I'm sure Scott could say it better and even has better ideas, but that's what's coming to
No,
mind.
that's exactly it. I mean, sex addiction, withdrawal, restless, irritable, discontent, turn a molehill into a mountain like that. And it's because our medicine's been taken away and we don't have any coping skills other than that. So for a long time, we look like jerks. Um, but hopefully we're displaying rigorous honesty or something approaching rigorous honesty. Hopefully we've stopped acting out. If you're a betrayed partner, trust your gut. If your gut says he's doing the deal, even if I don't see it all the time, he's probably doing the deal. And if your gut says, I think he's full of crap, I think he's checking boxes so that I'll think he's, trust your gut a little bit. But yeah, I mean, there is withdrawal, and moodiness is the big one for sure. Um, and I always tell addicts that I work with, why doesn't my betrayed partner trust me? Like, why doesn't my betrayed partner trust me yet? Is a better question. You acted out for years, decades. It's going to take a full year at least, and maybe longer, before your partner is really able to actually trust you again. And the trust will never be unconditional like it was before discovery. And that's fine. Um, you know, but at least it's real this time. It's based on rigorous honesty, hopefully. Um, I think that's attached to the previous. Okay. How do you help? Oh, I love this one. How do you help the addict deal with checking outs on the street? Like yoga pants walks by and they're like, that I think that's what this question is
Yeah,
about.
yeah. I think you have to be really clear about who you're helping. I was working with a couple the other day, and um, she had made some requests for some things that he would do while she was on the road for business, and he didn't do them. And they talked about this whole like, I don't want to be his mother, like, so I don't even want to tell him what to do. And he said, I want to know this stuff, but yeah, it does feel like this list of demands. And it came to me, and I said to her, I said, it's okay for you to have things you need him to do in his recovery for you. He may not need to bridge every 3 hours while you're gone with someone in recovery. He may not need that. You might need that. That might put your mind at ease knowing that
Right.
he's doing that. And both of them was kind of this, oh, okay. So for the addict, I think the 3 second rule is important. Um, this is not justifying anything, but noticing happens. That is, we have eyes, we have ears, we have noses. Like, we notice our surroundings. That's hardwired in us. The problem for the addict is what I notice becomes sexual fodder for my fantasy. So the 3 second rule is, you notice, that's what I'm looking. Oh, yoga pants. I'm looking at yoga pants. Humanize the person. Um, that is a living, breathing human being, not an object for my sexual gratification. And 3 is let it go. Don't need to spend any more time on that. So for the addict, and some people interpret the 3 second rules as I get to look for 3 seconds. No, it's like 3 beats, 3 dance steps. You're changing direction because you really have to rewire. And people who work at that vigilantly, it gets beautiful for them. One of my clients in long-term recovery was telling me a little while ago. He lives in an apartment complex, and he's single. And a neighbor of his, someone that he recognized from his church, is at the pool with her friend, and they're wearing bikinis. And they say, "Come over here, talk to us." And he said, I wasn't even thinking. I go over and I talked with them for more than an hour. And he said, you know what my favorite part of it was? Is I recognize they're both in bikinis, and it was one thought at the beginning. And then it was like, I'm talking to these people that I don't know, and it's a conversation. And that is years of that 3 second rule work going, like,
Yeah.
rewired brain right there. Sex is not the most important thing in my world. how do you help a partner? How do you help a betrayed partner with checking out on the street? The setup is simple. If you are an addict in recovery and you know that you're checking out, you're cruising with your eyes, whatever you want to call it, if you know that's been damaging from your part with your partner, I would recommend, if you are still struggling with it, be very careful about how often and where you go in public. Give it a rest. When you do go out in public, you have to work, you have to think, you keep your attention on your partner.
Right.
I'm with you. Here's the rewiring in the relationship. In the past, every time you would follow yoga pants down on the sidewalk, your partner would feel replaced, betrayed. What better medicine is there to give than when we are out in public? There is no doubt in your mind, I'm here with you. My attention is all here. And when your partner says to you, you were checking her out, weren't you? Instead of starting a fight and getting defensive, you own it. I've put that fear inside of you. I'm so sorry you have to worry about that when we're out. I want to assure you my attention is here. Or if you were looking at her, you own it. I'm so sorry. I slipped. I shouldn't do that.
Do you
Yeah.
recommend that couples, like, I'm walking down the street and bikinis, yoga pants walks right in front of the two of us. So I look down at my feet. I'm not going to objectify. And then my partner gets triggered. Do you recommend, like, I talk to my partner before we, at some time when we're calm and say, how do you want me to handle this? Should I just look at my feet? Do you want me to use a 3-second rule? What do you want me to
That's
do?
that's helpful. And I would follow it up also with, how are we going to handle it when it happens?
Yeah,
So what do you want me to do is a good start. How are we going to handle it? And for most couples that I work with, if they are not able to both acknowledge
right.
that was there,
Hmm.
then it becomes the monster under the bed that you can never ever look at. It gets bigger and scarier
Yeah,
versus just being able to say, okay, wow, like neither of us needed that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I mean, some couples I know, it's almost like a joke. Oh, just checking to make sure I'm still, God just checking to make sure I'm still an addict, or
Yeah.
something. And they laugh about it and get on with their day. But it can be very
Yeah.
triggering, by the way, for a betrayed partner to see the addict using a tool of recovery, because that means the addict was triggered. And
Yeah.
that's tough for a betrayed partner. But when it's a we system, it's easier, I think.
And recognizing in the we system, as much as I wish you did not have addiction as part of your struggle or your
Yeah.
background, I know now that you do. So I may not have known in the beginning what I was getting into, but I know now. And being with an addict is a choice that I'm making right now. So that's part of that we thinking, and it changes it from this should never ever happen to we've really got to work
Yeah.
on doing this dynamic better, because if we don't, it's hurting us.
Yeah. Well stated. Thank you. Okay, one more here. 3 years post D-Day, the sex addict is sober, but all the attitudes that hurt, Darvo, secrets, defensiveness, etc., continue. It is breaking my soul. How can I communicate this to him when he can't hear me, or I would say won't?
Yeah, you do it with your feet, so to speak. Several years ago, I think the conversation with my spouse, it had something to do with money. And I don't really remember what exactly I said, but I could see the moment where I just like fatally wounded her. And she looked at me and she said, I don't want you to come home tonight. And it's the first and only time in our marriage that that has happened. And I was, what? Okay, I'm sorry. And I got a hotel that night. You know, called my kids to say goodnight, um, to go to bed, had a very uncomfortable, lonely sleep, um, was up at like the crack of dawn, had to kill several hours before work started. Like, and then at the end of the day, we came back and we talked things through and, figured things out. But um, if your words aren't getting through and your emotions aren't getting through, you have to show, this isn't working for me. This isn't going to fly. I cannot tolerate this. Again, it's that you have to allow your partner to feel some pain, because that may be the only thing that motivates out of that.
Yeah. Um, We have one more question here. Do we have time? Yeah, we do. Okay. Regarding the 3-second rule, my sex addict says, oh, for him, 1 second is all his brain needs to take a mental photo that stores in his brain. Body parts, not people. How do we shift away from this? Because that's a very good question.
Yeah, again, I think it takes a lot of like, there's a lot of automaticity to that, and I'm not making an excuse for the person who does that, but you know, for most addicts, you don't need new images in your brain to have an endless supply of things you could go through. So it's really looking at your relationship with those fantasy images. Why are you using that? What could you use instead to you know, bring relief? And you know, it's once you realize you don't need something anymore, it's easy to stop collecting it. It doesn't make a lot of sense to keep collecting it. And so it's work on that deeper level, I think, processing through what those images have meant, why you store them, and what you're going to do instead.
Yeah, and I mean, I do things like I'll just say, I don't need this in my head. I'm going to get rid of
Yeah,
this. Just erase.
yeah,
Um, or I'll pick up the phone and I'll tell somebody I got this image in my head. I'm just committing to you that I'm getting rid of it. I'm hitting the delete button, and
I when
that
I was
works.
well, when I was early in recovery, I would tap my belt buckle as like a physical delete button, and I would not like I would work at not reviewing any details from the picture, like blank
Okay.
screen in my mind. It's a one day at a time rewiring of the brain. It's difficult.
Yeah. If after checking they see but not imaging later, it means they're getting better. Yeah, look, I mean, I'm 22 years sober from this addiction. I still notice. I gotta be honest, but it doesn't take that next step into objectifying and making a movie out of it. I don't do that anymore, and thank God. Good riddance. But I can actually live my life now instead of running away from life. But it took a lot of time and a lot of effort to go from a guy who sexualized everyone and everything 24/7 to a guy who is fairly normal and sort of kind of like, yeah, okay, and move on. A lot of work. So, I
Definitely.
mean, what Jon described about his client who went to the pool and was like able to have a conversation. Yay, I'm happy for the guy.
Yeah.
That's a guy with real recovery. So good for him.
Yeah.
So, anything you want to say to take us out, Jon?
I'll be excited for the next one. Send that advice in. We'll see y'all
Yeah.
later.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye.